Hey everybody, it's Kyla at the MJC again, and I am back to walk you guys through the first part of the assets section of the financial disclosure, and that is the household items piece. But before we get going, as always, let me remind you guys that nothing in this video is intended to be legal advice. It's obviously a video, so I'm not able to analyze your specific situation and to evaluate whether what you're doing is right for your situation, whether what you're doing is in your best interest, or whether a court is going to approve what you are proposing and asking for. So, if you do have questions along those lines, you can get brief legal advice for free here in Milwaukee through the Marquette Volunteer Legal Clinics. If you are not located here in Milwaukee, you can contact the clerk of court in your county to find out what resources are available for people representing themselves out where you are. All right, so let's jump into this. And first things first, let me go ahead and answer the most common question we get about this. Yes, you do have to do this section. A lot of people will say, well, I don't have to do this because my spouse and I don't own anything together. Doesn't matter, you still have to do it. They'll say, well, I shouldn't have to do it because my stuff isn't worth anything. You still have to do it. They'll say, I don't need to do it because my spouse and I already split up all the things that we owned together. You still have to do it. Everybody has to do this section. All right, so we've got that out of the way. So you're going to look at this, and how you fill it out will vary a little depending on your situation. So if you and your spouse have already split up any items that you own together, or if you never owned any items together, then you will just fill this out reflecting your stuff. So if you've already split your things up, the stuff that you're keeping, and anything that you acquired after you and your spouse stopped being together, and anything that you owned before you got married. So all of your stuff, again, even if your spouse's name has never been on it, even if it's never something you own together, you'll still include it here. If you still have your stuff together, then you'll be including basically all of the stuff that both of you have, both together and separately. So all of your stuff. Or there's a third group of people who might have most of your stuff separately, but a few things that you need to include because that's stuff you're still talking about. And so then here you'd want to include your stuff plus anything your spouse has that you want to talk about. All right, so now let's jump into it with all that preface. Household furniture is exactly what it sounds like. It's any furniture, so tables, chairs, desks. If you have a bedroom set or a dining room set or anything like that, that would all be household furniture. And it also includes accessories. So if you have a lamp, a rug, a TV, a TV stand, drapes, things like that are all accessories. So over here under the ownership section, you're going to indicate who currently owns it, or if it's a titled item, who has the title. And again, if you've already split your stuff up, then that's just going to be you, whichever one you are. And so our categories are A, that is the petitioner, or if you filed jointly, that's joint petitioner A. B is the respondent, or if you filed jointly, joint petitioner B. And T stands for together, so anything that you own together. So we're going to fill this out as if Jane and John have already split their stuff up, because that's the way we find that most people are doing it when they're coming into our clinics. So here, Jane is the petitioner, so she does have some furniture. She would check A. That's saying that it's owned by her. And possession, it's currently in her house, so we would check A again. Here's where you're going to put if you owe any money on it. So, if maybe Jane had a loan on the furniture, she'd put how much in total is still owed on that. So not the monthly payment, the whole amount owed. And here you're just going to put a rough estimate of what you think all of your furniture and accessories are worth. So it's basically if you sold all of your stuff, all of your furniture anyway, at a yard sale, what would you ask for it? And so here, just your best estimate. So we'll guess, Jane says she thinks all her stuff's worth about $1,000. Next section is household appliances. And I guess I should note before I get going with this estimate, some people say, well, I would never sell my stuff. I don't want to sell my stuff. They're not necessarily going to make you sell your stuff. They just want to know roughly what it's worth. They're trying to get a feel for how much all of your stuff is worth. So that's all you'll do there is just your best estimate of what somebody might pay for it. Household appliances includes big appliances, of course, fridges and ovens and that, big freezers, that kind of thing. Also includes little appliances. So if you have a toaster or a microwave or a coffee maker or a blender, that would go here as well. So same thing, you'll indicate who owns it, the current possession, if anything is owed on that stuff, and just a rough estimate of what you think it is worth. So, just a rough estimate there. And one thing I should note is if you don't have anything, let's say I don't have any china, silver, crystal, which is down here. Typically at the MJC, we write none on this first line. You can see where my cursor is right now. We would write it there. If you're handwriting, write it there. But if you are typing on these forms from the WI Court site, they don't seem to have a writable box there. So what I would probably do is don't fill in any of this, and just in the estimated value section, put none. So that's what you would do in any of these lines if you don't have something. But don't just leave it all blank. We would typically indicate that you do have none, just so it's clear you didn't accidentally miss a line. All right, so anyway, going back to kitchen equipment, pots, pans, spoons, bowls, all that kind of stuff we would call kitchen equipment. Basically anything that goes in your kitchen that isn't an appliance, so that isn't something that plugs in. You'll put who owns it, and then here whose possession it's in, and then any amount owed. And again, just a yard sale value, roughly what you think you could sell all of your kitchen equipment for. Next, we've got jewelry. And so here with jewelry, you'll include costume jewelry as well. So of course include if you have any real jewelry, real gold or real silver or anything like that. Do include that kind of jewelry. But you'll also include costume jewelry. You guys can't see me right now, but I have a cheap Timex watch that I think I got for $20 at Walmart. That is still something I would have to include. So I would have to say, yes, I own some jewelry. It's in my possession. And, I don't owe any money on it. And then here, I put a yard sale value on that. And it might not be very much. So if it's just my watch, that might only be $5. And I don't even know if anyone would pay $5 for it. But I'd still list that. So don't skip a section just because you say the stuff you have isn't worth anything. You want to list everything you have, even if it's only worth $5. Same thing here, clothes. Most people have clothes. So that's, one thing we'll see. People will skip it and they'll say, well, I don't have any clothes. And I go, well, whose clothes are you wearing, right? So most people have some clothes, even if it's not very many. And you'll, again, just indicate if it's the petitioners, the respondents, or if it's together. And so in our situation, Jane is just saying she has it. And keep in mind, this includes stuff like if she went and bought a bunch of clothes after she and John stopped living together, that's fine. We would still include those in our estimates here. So any amount owed goes here. The estimated value today goes here. Antiques, if you have any old furniture, old items, I think the formal definition of antiques is 100 years, but if you have something you consider an antique, you would go ahead and list it here. If you don't have any of that, then remember, just put none on this line. And here it's a little weird because the spacing, you can't see these A, B, T. So you can either just remember them, or if you want, you can write them there so you can see them again. But just make sure you're following that same pattern down here. Art is any art that you have, any paintings or sculptures or anything like that. You don't need to include if your kids drew a picture for you or made you something in ceramics class. But any, fancy art, any art that, that you paid money for, decorative stuff. Electronic equipment includes TVs, computers, smartphones, iPads, iPods. If you have speakers for those sorts of things, gaming systems, controllers to go with the gaming systems, all that kind of stuff. Cell phones, a lot, all the stuff of life these days. So make sure you'll want to include electronic equipment if you have anything. Again, even if it's just you have a cell phone or something. And again, who owns it? So that would be, again, if you split your stuff up, you, whichever one you are, or if your stuff's all together, it might be together. And then whose possession it's in. So again, Jane is saying all her stuff is in her possession. You'll put what you owe on it, if anything. And then again, a rough estimate of what you think you could sell all of your electronic equipment for. keeping in mind we're looking at a real resale value here, so it wouldn't necessarily have to be what you spent on it, it's what you think someone would pay for it now. Sports equipment includes baseballs, baseball bats, tennis rackets, anything like that. Skis would go here. Some people will include firearms, rifles, guns under sports equipment. Some people think they're better categorized under other. So if you have guns, rifles, those sorts of things, you can sort of take your pick between sports equipment or if it's better categorized as other. Here, again, just same thing. We're going to indicate who has it, who owns it, whose possession it's in, and then a rough estimate of anything owed on it, and roughly what you think you could sell it for. Here, recreational vehicles, you'll include ATVs, boats, snowmobiles, and again, with boats, if you have a little, inflatable dinghy that you take out on the river or something, you'd still include that. If you have kayaks, you'd include those here. If you don't have that stuff, you'd put none. Tools does include hand tools, so if you have a hammer or a screwdriver or anything like that, that would go here. And again, just with all of these, you're going to indicate who owns them, whose possession they're in, and then whether anything is owed on it, and a rough estimate of the value. There are also two other sections if you have anything that doesn't fit into these categories. Not things like cars, because as you can see, we'll get to that in some upcoming section. But anything that would go in your house that doesn't fit into these categories. And so, as I mentioned, some people will put firearms here. Some people include them as sports equipment. It's sort of however you want to approach that. And again, who owns them, whose possession they're in, if there's anything owed on them. And then here, last but not least, a rough estimate of what you think it's worth. All right, well, that is all for this section. I will be back shortly to go through all of the other sections in this form. Hopefully this was helpful for you. If it wasn't helpful, that's disappointing. But the good news is we do have people available to help at the Milwaukee Justice Center located in room G9 of the Milwaukee County Courthouse. So that is all for this. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you all go out and represent yourselves well.